Welcome to lesson 6 of our YouTube Photoshop tutorials. My name is Arnold Faller, and today it's less of a general Photoshop tools tutorial but more of a practical example. In the picture you see what we're up to. We're going to create a Polaroid effect on an image as if it's the Polaroid image would be glued on it kind of thing. So let's get right into it. If you look at Polaroid images in general, let me quickly close that and open my start image. If you look for Polaroid images in general, you'll see that they have a very specific look to it. First of all, the picture itself is square, has a square aspect ratio. Then we have the frame around it, which is basically paper glued onto it, so it's a little bit higher, so there's a little step in there, and it's the same distance on all sides, and on the bottom there's a little bit more of distance, and that gives you the very specific Polaroid look. If you go into the internet, there's all kinds of tutorials and all kinds of templates as well. Of how to get the frame. Not all of them are correctly. Some of them show the back side of the picture. But what we're going to do, we're going to go for something like this, but we're going to create it ourselves. So all you need to start this tutorial is any picture from your last holiday or anything like this that has some iconic building object on it, landscape, something that you want to look at and want to take a Polaroid of it. So in this case it's a picture from Chicago. Here's the bike path on the beach. Here's Lakeshore Drive, and we got the John Hancock building right here in the center of the picture. So let's get started and I'll show you what to do. So the first thing is we need a rectangular selection, so the rectangular marquee tool, and we need to have a selection that holds or covers the essential part of it. So I'm going to create a selection. I'm holding the shift key in order to get a square selection, and make sure you get a little bit, and you don't have the same picture obviously, but make sure you have everything that is essential in this rectangular frame. While you are still in the selection tool, you can also move around your selection. In my case, I'm going to make sure that only the Hancock building is, so to say, the tallest, and I'm going to cut off this one a little bit. And I also made sure that there's some of the lake water on it. So here's the essential part that I have selected with a rectangular marquee tool. And now what I'm going to do is, out of my background image, I'm going to copy this part of the image. So I use Control C, Control V, and now I get on an extra layer, I get this, the content of my Polaroid picture. The next step is I'm going to create a new layer. So layer here, and I'm going to create a new layer. And on this new layer, make sure you are on it. I'm going to create the white paper of the Polaroid image. So again, I'm using a rectangular marquee tool, this time not a square selection, this time a rectangular selection. I'm going to create a selection that has equal distances. I'm just eyeballing it here. Equal distances on 3 sides and a little bit more on the bottom side. It's not necessary to be too precise. So I drew a rectangular selection here. If you're not satisfied, just redo it until you think it's okay. You can also slightly move it after the next step. So here's my selection of the area, and now I'm going to fill it in white color. So to fill it in white, you can either make a right click here and use fill, or go up here to edit and fill in white. Okay. Of course, I don't need my selection anymore, so I use Control D for deselect. And now I have my 2 layers. Unfortunately, the white layer, the paper, is on top of the picture, so I have to correct that to make sure the picture is on top. So that already looks a lot like a Polaroid image. We're going to do a couple small effects to it. First of all, the white paper looks really very white and clean, and it needs a little of texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the layer here, the white layer. I'm going to turn it into a smart object, because what I'm applying is a filter, and when I have a layer that is a smart object, I can anytime adjust or change the settings for my filter. So convert it into a smart object and then place a filter. I'm going to use the filter gallery. You don't see a lot because it's all white, but you can also zoom out here. So here's my my white piece, and I'm going to apply a texture, and I'm going to use the texturizer. It's a simple canvas texture, so there's different forms. Here's canvas, and here's one or maybe two that produces a little bit of a canvas texture on it. So if I zoom in here, you see that it's not perfectly white, but it has some kind of texture. Maybe this is too strong, so as I said, when I use a smart object, I can anytime double click the filter and adjust the settings. So, oh, I just realized that I did it on my second screen, sorry about that. So when I adjust my texture, I do it again. Here is the filter gallery, and I use the texture and texturizer canvas, and the relief height is, I'm just put it to 1. Okay, so once you applied it, you can always double click. So in this case, turn it into a smart object, select the layer, filter, and filter gallery. It always opens in the other window, okay? Cancel. The next thing is, when you take a look at your Polaroid images, you see that they all have a little shadow. Maybe it's good to see here. Yes, that's a typical different format, but still you can see that there's a little shadow here because it is actually, the paper is a little bit higher and the picture itself is underneath. So I want this shadow to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. Let me zoom out here a bit. I'm going to apply the effect to my picture though, because the picture layer is in my case above the paper. So I have to make sure that I somehow get a shadow here. So I select the picture layer itself, use an effect, and I use an inner shadow. I cannot, oh, it's so perfect. The inner shadow, it's always set to multiply. The opacity in your case might be different. So in my case, the opacity is 50. The angle, I just chose an angle that's coming from the top right. And the distance in my case is 8 pixels, but you have to play with your settings. So here's the distance, how many pixels it goes in, and what the size is, like how sharp or how blurry the edge is. So in my case, both for 8 or around 8 was kind of okay. Okay, so now I have this little shadow here that helps me to look. It looks as if it's a little window and the picture is slightly behind it. And the next thing is on Polaroid images, and you know this when you look at all those collections, they all have some kind of weird colors. They all have a more or less warm tone. They sometimes have a vignette effect. They have maybe over-exaggerated colors. Sometimes they're even washed out. So you're pretty much free to use whatever effect you want on the picture. Just make sure it's different from your background image, because it should look more like a picture. So here's the first thing that we're going to do. We're going to focus on the picture itself. So I'm going to place an adjustment layer on top of the image, all the way on top. So I'm using an adjustment layer. And the first thing is I'm going to use hue and saturation. In hue and saturation, I'm going to use colorize, and I'm going to go for a warm orange tone, and I even increase the saturation. This is not what I want. I don't want this sepia style here, but let me turn on my background so maybe you see it better then. So my background, which is just turned on, and now you can see that the adjustment layer that I've added is adjusting all the layers underneath. So it is colorizing the picture, it's colorizing the paper actually, and it's also colorizing the background. To make sure this is not happening, you're just clicking this button here. That is switches between affecting only one layer and all layer underneath. So here it is. By turning this on, it affects only one layer. So there's an adjustment layer turning it into an orange sepia style thing. It's not what I want, not in this strength. So this adjustment layer, I'm simply touching its opacity and I'm trying to put it around 40%. Gives me, you see, a totally different style because it's slightly orangely colorizing the whole picture. The next thing is I want my my picture to have a little bit more contrast than the rest of the picture. So what I'm doing is I'm applying another adjustment layer on top of it. This time I'm using curves. I already explained what curves do. You can adjust the brightness of the certain pixels, of the darker pixels, make them brighter or darker, or the bright ones darker or brighter. In this case, the darker on the left side, I'm going to make the dark pixels darker and the bright pixels brighter. So I'm going to create a slight S curve, also only for one layer. So I'm also going to unclick that because I don't want the effect on the background itself. So there it is, before and after. See, much more contrast, the darks are getting darker and the brights are getting brighter. And now I want my color to be more exaggerated, more stronger, so I'm placing another adjustment layer on top, and that is a, let me quickly, let's go for the vibrance. Let's go for the vibrant, which is a kind of contrasting color, which you can also go for saturation. So I'm placing the vibrance and I'm increasing vibrance, so more contrasting colors, and I'm also gonna increase the saturation. You can see the effect also changes my background image, which I don't want. So again, turn this on or off. This, I think now it's on, so that it doesn't affect all the layer underneath. So even if we have three adjustment layers now, they all affect only the layer right underneath them, which is my picture layer itself. So okay, so here it was. Let's turn it quickly off. From the normal picture, first we changed the hue saturation and kind of tinted it into a warm orange, kind of wrongly developed film. Then we're gonna edit the contrast with a S curve, and I'm gonna adjust it, the brightness, sorry, the vibrance, the colors in the picture. You could also do this in different orders, so it's not a very specific order. The last one that I'm using here will provide me with a little vignette. That means the picture should be bright in the middle and get darker towards the outside. That's why I'm going to add another curve to it, another curve adjustment layer on the very top. And in this layer I'm going to use to make the whole thing darker. First, I do it more extreme, and then later on I'll change the curve a little bit more. Again, only one layer should be made darker, and this is of course way too dark. That's why I'm going to go into the mask of the curve adjustment layer. I'm clicking on the mask to make sure I'm really painting on the mask. Now I'm using my brush tool, and see it already fits perfect. I'm gonna choose right click. I'm gonna use a soft round brush of a pretty large size. In this case I have 1400 pixels, and now I'm gonna paint only one. Oh, sorry, I'm painting right now, I'm painting in white. I have to switch that. I'm painting in black. Make sure it's opacity 100, painting in black. And I'm painting a mask just in the middle. 2-3 clicks. And now you can see the effect is not applied to the middle because the mask, this is how the mask looks like. The effect is not applied where it's black, and it's only applied where it's white. So the effect is only applied outside, but outside is not affected, only at the edge here. So there is the effect, see, a little bit of a focusing on the center of the Polaroid, and I'm quite happy with it. So I'm going to take those layers and put them all in a folder. in a, so I'm going to create a new folder, a new group. Down here is a new group. I'm going to call, the name of the group, I don't care. And I'm going to put all the layers from all the adjustment layers and the paper and the picture layer, one shift last. I'm going to take them and put them inside the group. So you can now close the group and you have all the things in one layer. Now, why did I do this? Because now I want to do something to those images that later on, if I want to undo something, I'm gonna destroy some of the layers that I created, because I'm gonna collapse it, I'm gonna flatten it all together. But before I do this, please make a backup. So here's my group with all the layers inside except the background, which I'm never touching. Here's my group, and I select the group and do a right click and duplicate group. I'm gonna call it backup. So the group is called backup, and I'm gonna put it, I cannot put it underneath, it doesn't matter, I just turn it off. This is my backup, whenever I need it again. So now I'm going to go do something to this group that cannot be undone. That's why I'm going to open it, and I'm selecting all my elements here, from here to all the way down, shift, and I choose right click and merge layers. So you select some layers, then you can also do it here, layers, merge layers. Do not go for visible, because that will merge all of them. So merge layers will only merge the selected layers. So I selected all of those and then merge layers. So there it is. Now all the things are together on one layer. So if I go for the move tool, for example, you can see it's all on one layer. So what am I going to do that cannot be undone? First, that can be undone, of course. I'm going to transform it. That is Control-T or Edit Free Transform. Because I would like the picture to be slightly rotated. So I'm going to rotate it a little bit. And I'm also going to shift it a little bit out of place, move it up, so that we don't cut off the guy's head down there. So it's shifted up a little bit, so it looks like it's not correctly placed. That is good. Now I'm also going to warp it a little bit, so that it looks not like a perfect square, but as if it is has been on the picture for quite a while. So Edit Free Transform, you don't need to apply it. You can right away go to Transform Warp, and that will create the warp points. The warp points are right around the layer, and what you want to do is just do a little changes here at the corner. So I'm going to take a corner, pull it in, pull it up this way, and I'm not going to change this way too much. Then maybe warp it a little bit, so make this one go in, this one goes in a little bit, so not too much. Okay, slightly warped. I didn't warp it too much. Yeah, let's do it here as well. So, like this. When you're satisfied, hit Enter, and now you see this is something that we cannot undo it. Now, that is almost done. The last thing that we're going to apply to it is a shadow underneath, so that it supports the warp of the picture even more, because the shadow will create a larger shadow where the corners are warped out a little bit and less than this. So to do this, here's a little trick. What I need now is I need a selection of my layer boundaries, so all the way around it. That's not hard, that's not too easy to do, because it is a bent line and would have to use a polygon LUS, so I can hardly get it precisely. Here's a quick way that I usually do it. When I have to be on the layer, so I select the layer, then I use a rectangle marquee tool and I select the whole thing roughly around to make sure that everything is inside. Now I switch to move, and I use the arrow keys on the keyboard, and I go one step to the right. Just click one click on move, and basically the selection then shrinks onto the picture and moves all the pixels that are now selected of the layer to one to the right, and I don't want to move it actually. That's why I also hit another time, one time to the left. So I have not moved it, but I made the selection shrink to the boundaries of the layer. In this case, it's not really important, but there are other cases where this works really well. So let me quickly do it again. Here's a rough selection. Just make sure everything is inside. Change to the move tool. 1, 2, 1 to the right, one to the left, and you're back with a perfectly fit selection. So now the selection is the same size as the picture, but what I want actually is I want the selection to be differently warped than the picture. That's why you cannot warp selections usually, but when you go to select and choose transform selection, it turns the selection into something like a layer which can be transformed, scaled, rotated, and so on. So I'm going to move transform selection. Sorry. And now with transform selection on, I can go for edit, transform, warp. It's a little differently because I've rotated it, but it's now I can warp the selection. So now the blinking parts will be selected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a warping that supports the edges that are sticking out. So here on this side a little bit out and like this. Here it goes in actually. So just this corner gets out, and here we are everywhere inside, and maybe this is warped, so selection is closer. Okay, so just these corners here stick out. Here you can see how far it sticks out. With this selection, hit enter. Now I have the selection differently warped, and now I'm going to apply an adjustment layer that makes the picture underneath darker. And I'm using a curve. So, curve. With the selection on, the adjustment, and I'm going to do it really strong, will adjust all the layers below. So I have to make sure now that the adjustment layer is between the picture, which is called curves 2, and curve 3. Let's quickly change that. That is my picture. So that is the picture, that is the curve, and now it makes the background darker. It's too much, I know. I have to change the values for the curves a little bit, but let me show you the mask that actually limits the darkness only to this part. So I'm going to use Alt-click on the mask. So this is the white areas will be made dark and the blacks will not be touched. I don't want a sharp edge like this. So when I'm on the mask and I'm seeing the mask, I'm using a filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I'm going to blur the edges of this mask. Yeah, it depends on how big it is, 10, 12 pixels. So now we have a blurry edge. And now when we go back, it is not as sharp here. And we can anytime change the effect so it's not that much of a darkening, just a little bit. So there it is. Here's the whole picture. Here is our Polaroid glued to the background with a little shadow that looks as if it's sticking out or is a little bit warped. Okay, I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'm happy if you leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I will be right back with another example of all the things we have learned so far in Photoshop. Thanks for your attention and see you in the next one.